Welcome back to the Minutemen Initiative. Today we're going to be talking about how to have a responder mindset and talking a little bit about basic medical skills, just a little bit of the stuff getting into it and what you need, things you need to know, some just brief stuff on gear you might need to have, but ultimately just talking about shifting focus to really trying to be your own first responder and taking responsibility for basic medical knowledge and skills to kind of take care of yourself. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode, and thanks. Dude, are we going to have to make a Twitter account for the company now, or
I
what?
guess so, yeah.
Yeah, after somebody bought it for $44 billion?
Yeah, that's wild cash, too,
Was
right?
it billion or million?
Billion.
Oh.
So that's what freedom of speech costs now.
Dude, that's a good way to put that.
$44 billion.
Cash. I think it's important to make that distinction because that's crazy. I can't even, how does that even exist?
Right.
Well,
How do you go get $44 billion cash? How do you physically
he is the
get
richest
that?
man in the world, so.
But is it actually cash?
I mean, not anymore probably, but.
I thought that he had other outside investors in that, but it just doesn't matter.
Dude, pretty epic, though. Good for old Elon. And did you see his tweet where he said, what did he say? He said something along the line, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines of, I hope my worst critics are on Twitter because that's what free speech is all about.
Yeah.
So solid.
Well, that's the way it should be, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I've never even thought about Twitter. Never used it. Never been a consideration as far as being on social media. But now it kind of makes me want to jump on there and just post random thoughts.
Yeah, not have this pop-up come on your picture or whatever that says missing context.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
I know. I mean, he should just spend the other
44 billion.
The other 1/3 of his wealth. Wasn't it 1/3 of his wealth or something like that?
No, he had I think 200 something odd billion.
Oh,
So it wasn't a third.
crazy. Well, he's got plenty of money to buy Meta or whatever it's called
Right?
now. Just buy Facebook and Instagram and whatever else is wrapped up in Meta.
But
So
you know what I'm worried about?
Does he make money off of Twitter? Is it a good investment?
Dude, I don't know.
I don't know how that works.
Well,
I think he just did it because he just seems like he's one of those people that's just like, I don't really like the way things are going. I'm rich, and he just makes it happen.
But what I'm worried about is it's that cancel culture thing again. So they're going to be like, well, we can't handle this. So we're going to move over here and we're going to create something else where we can manage and take over.
Oh yeah, the cancel culture disease is never cured. It's always constantly spreading and driving on to the next thing.
But the people who love free speech are now going to love Twitter.
Speaking of people that love free speech, we have Josh Jewett on the podcast with us this morning. So if you're wondering who this sultry, sexy, smooth voice is over here,
This elusive plumber.
that's our good buddy and member of Dynamic Defense Solutions, Joshua Jewett. Welcome to the podcast.
It is fantastic to be here with my buddies once again.
Yep. Yeah, so Josh is an OG guest. He was on our old podcast, the DDS Unscripted podcast, back in the day. But he's back. He's back on the Minutemen Initiative, and we're going to talk about medical stuff today. So we actually, the three of us just got done with our trauma response training course. We just did a corporate training. So one of a local organization hired us to come in and train their pilots and some of their guys that work out in the field to in this stuff. So a little bit of stuff just in case they were to get in a crash or around the job site, work site, stuff like that. They just wanted to get some skills and get kind of learned up on it and get a little more confident in being able to deal with medical emergencies out in the field.
So what do you think is a good start to somebody's training in a first responder situation?
Well, I think, I think first of all, the important part is to answer that question, I think one of the best things you can do, like I think a good launch point is as lame as it might sound, is getting CPR first aid certified. I think it's a really good like building block.
A base level.
Yeah.
Yep.
And everyone should know CPR. I mean, CPR is one of those things that honestly, I don't understand why it's not taught in schools. I think it's something that should be taught at least in high school. And honestly, probably in like middle school, or upper elementary, because children can grasp it. And the only, hindrance would be their physical size and weight and stuff. So they might not have the physical ability to do compressions and stuff like that.
Well, the way that I'm looking at it, though, is that you know that somebody has had CPR, but they can't execute it well.
Oh,
I mean, we've run into that a lot.
I think that comes down to instructors, though. Most of the time with that, it's just poor instruction and more of a check the box, whether that's the student just going in and checking the box or whether that's the actual instructor going in and checking the box so that way he can certify a bunch of people.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean that's one of the other sad kind of parts of CPR or first aid training is that one, the requirements to become an instructor, in my opinion, are very lacking. I think they could be a lot more strict. I think that in order to become an instructor, you should have to. I think there should be a more extensive process for you to show that you understand the material and that you're able to deliver it in a good way, that you're able to teach the material. So that's an issue. The other issue with it is that you just basically pay money every few years to keep your certs activated, and that's all you got to do.
Yeah, it's just a check in the box.
Yep. So they don't actually retest you to see, hey, do you still understand this material? Are you keeping up to date with what's new? Because CPR changes a lot. The medical industry in general, or like treatments and stuff like that, change often. Every year at least. There's something new coming out, or maybe there's like new data, and they're like, hey, actually, rescue breathing does work, or rescue breathing doesn't. That's one of the things in CPR specifically that changes back and forth a lot. But, so looking back at these instructors and being like, hey, some kind of retest, even if it's just like an online test of some kind to test someone's knowledge, I think something like that would be good. So what I'm leading up to is that I think you see poor quality CPR from people that have taken a CPR class due to poor quality instructing.
Oh, I mean, look at the guy that trained us. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And that was an instructor for us to become instructors, and
an instructor of instructors.
Yeah.
And it was bad.
It was. I mean, no naming or anything, no name dropping. I could see it on the tip of Josh's tongue. No, I'm just kidding. No, but
you want to be professional, but
yeah,
at the same time,
you got to hold people to a high standard.
It needs to be like an awareness thing. Like these instructors need to be above reproach when it comes to this stuff, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because you're training people that are going to go train, hopefully, hundreds of people in this. And if you're training incorrectly, now you've passed on all this incorrect training. It only harms. It doesn't help anyone.
True. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But backing up a little bit, as far as training goes, I do think CPR is a good launching point. But backing up even farther, I think, and this is kind of going to be the focal point of this podcast today, is having a good responder mindset, having the mindset of a first responder, and understanding that is something that is mandatory. Like, this is something that if you practice preparedness, if you carry daily, if you're training for, if you're training to stand in the void, whether it be in, like a civil war or economic collapse, any of these like really, I guess, dark situations that we kind of hope to never see in the future, but prepare for just in case. These situations, there's not going to necessarily be hospitals around. There's not going to be 911. There's not going to be, the list goes on. So you are your first responder. I mean, and this is stuff you need to have the mindset of like, it's up to me. I'm responsible for my survival, medical is a massive part of that, and B, my family and community's survival. I think we need to do better as a community about looking at medical as a whole and being like, man, like there's basic stuff here that there's really no excuse for me to not know.
Yeah, we got to quit looking at it like it's almost like a commodity because, oh, yeah, I've got a doctor just down the road. Oh, I've got a nurse just down the road.
Yeah.
Like that.
Or EMS is 2 minutes away, so I don't really need to learn how to do this. So
yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, some of the weirdest situations, like I had a guy like walking down the aisle on a plane, and he like grabbed my chest, and I was like, "What in the world?" Because I thought he was like being a weirdo, but he collapsed right in the aisle.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he just completely collapsed, and I was like, "Oh, what in the?" Because I kind of like looked back. And I was like,
you're like, what you want, boy?
Why did that guy just like grope my chest?
Yeah.
And I turn around and he's collapsed on the floor.
Oh, wow.
And there was nobody there. That was me.
Yeah.
So it's like, you have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
And so I was able to get him up and he was in shock. I mean, he was cold, clammy skin and was not doing good. And there's not a whole lot of medical supplies on the plane.
Right.
So all we did was just kind of make sure that he was awake, which he was. He woke up, but he passed out first.
Weird.
Yeah,
was he diabetic or something?
Something. I couldn't get a whole lot because he was like slurring his words. So I don't know if he had like a heart attack.
Wow.
But
what'd they do? Did they end up making an emergency landing or anything? Or
no, it was like past the halfway point and we were going.
Yeah.
So he ended up being just fine.
Okay.
But the fact is, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that there's going to be very odd situations that happen in your life. And are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Because I'm that guy that's like, I'm a magnet to weird oddities.
I feel you. I feel you on that one.
Yeah. Dude, you nailed it, though. I mean, that's the thing, too, is coming back to this whole mindset in general of preparedness and, being willing to help, being willing to jump in. I mean, that's something we touch on a lot. Medical response is such a massive part of that. It's a massive part of that, and it's a frustrating thing seeing it get neglected.
No, I'm gonna hold my phone and take a video while something massive is happening.
I was there, guys.
Traumatized.
Yep.
Yeah.
The old I was there.
Yeah. Yeah, I was there for that, actually. I was sitting there and you're like, okay, why weren't you out of your vehicle, like running up to the car accident or whatever it is?
Oh, because it was Paul Walker and he's famous.
What?
No, they just stood by while he burned alive in the car.
Yeah.
Just with their phones out. That's it. That's it. The instance I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's just complete insanity to me.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it, too, is there's a few things with that, just to give people the benefit of the doubt. One, I think people are super intimidated and honestly don't know what to do. Josh is giving me the duh face, like that's where I'm going with this. Yeah, well, there's that. I think people are ignorant to the fact or to the skills they need to actually be helpful, and they think they're going to cause more harm than good, which is probably true if you don't know what you're doing. Two, I think people it's a lot of people that have never witnessed something like that before. It might be their first time taking something like that in, and they're like, and they're caught kind of deer in the headlights. Three, I think people overall are very intimidated by medical as a whole. I think they look at it, they're like, oh, doctors go to school for, several years just to get where they're at. And, and you see blood or, anything kind of gory or, you see somebody having a seizure or something that's not in the norm. It's not the normal way people kind of live and behave. And you're like, I think people get kind of back to the deer in the headlights. People are like, oh man, I don't know. Like I wouldn't even know where to begin. And it's true. You don't, unless you go and you have a basic understanding, which I think CPR and first aid does, even though it's very simple, it's a very short class. They're usually 6 to 8 hours, it's like one day. It's a very good foundation. You get some basic stuff. And a lot of them are a little outdated. Like I think they need to do some major upgrading or revamping to the blood loss section of CPR first aid. But as far as like just understanding cardiopulmonary resuscitation. It's pretty good. I mean, you
CPR.
you learn how to do compressions. You learn the proper way to do rescue breathing. They usually in CPR classes you're going to learn about
airway and
you're
going to do head tilt chin lift and
yep.
You're
going to they really harp on the importance of like getting 911 called, starting that response time starting the time on that. But so I think for sure that is a good launching point. But I just, I guess the whole focal point of today is really going to be harping on like, you can train in all this other stuff, but if you get, shot or you get cut and you're bleeding or you get like an infected injury or something, a scrape on your knee that gets infected. Yeah.
There's so many injuries that can happen that are pretty treatable if you know what you're doing. And it's really not that difficult once you know what you're doing. Like, it's not nearly as intimidating as one would think, I guess.
Yeah, they're actually very treatable. They're pretty manageable even by yourself, but they'll kill you if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, and how dumb would that be to just be the guy that's like, you've trained for all this other stuff and all these tactics and you're kicking indoors and you're saving the universe for your community, and then you get a scratch on the inside of your arm, like a deep scratch, and you're bleeding, and before you know it, you're going into shock, and then you've got infection, and then you're just, and your team around you is like, oh, you're done, dude. Sorry, we don't know what to do for you.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be in a tactical situation. What about a mother and child?
Yeah, exactly.
Like choking.
Yeah.
Do they know how to do the Heimlich maneuver?
Yep.
I mean, it's very, very simple things that do happen.
Oh, all the time.
We're talking about preparedness.
Yep.
Medically being prepared to handle situations.
I mean, look over right now at Ukraine. That is a full populace of people that's such a just there's such a lack in basic medical understanding and training there.
Yeah.
We're seeing it time and time again. People being pulled out of the rubble, little kids, adults, just that need CPR, and people don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what they need. People don't know how to clear the airway. Little simple physical things you can do in the pre-hospital setting, or in their case, this is what we got. This is the best they'll get is who's with them right now. That's what it is. I mean, if it's a state of war like they're in, whoever's there with them in the moment, that's their hospital setting. Yeah. That's what they got. So, and it's not really their fault. I think it's part of it's just the culture over there, and they obviously were, at one point part of the Soviet Union, and there's corruption and all kinds of weird stuff. So there's not really, I guess the logistics haven't been there for them to really focus on that stuff. But it's just a good example of like, so many lives would be getting saved right now if they had some basic medical supplies and knowledge. And you're seeing a lot of American and companies in the UK, NATO countries jumping in, sending medical supplies, sending people to help train. Like I know that a bunch of UK like SAS medics and stuff like that were going over there and doing stuff. I think they're just like consulting, they're just like helping train. We're a North American Rescue Dealer. They've been sending tons of stuff over there and trying to helping with like really cool like virtual training assistants and stuff like that. It's not just them. There's like a coalition of that going on. Really cool stuff, honestly. So, and that's good. That's awesome that people are jumping in, but yeah, I mean, it shouldn't have to happen. I think just like all this other stuff we talk about, like we talked about radios recently, about saying, this isn't something that when you need to use a radio, that's the time to figure it out.
Yeah.
Medical's the same way. When you need medical assistance and you need medical skills, that's not the moment to figure out how to, to start learning medical skills. This is something you need to work on.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little frustrating because when I first got introduced to you guys, I honestly didn't know what a good tourniquet was. I didn't know a whole lot about blood clot. I didn't know, really kind of basic things I feel like need to be taught. And I had to go out there in the universe of learning myself and take it upon myself to be a responsible adult and learn these things.
Yeah.
Everybody's got blood in their body. Everybody's got bones in their body. Everybody's got brains. I mean, why are we not absolutely teaching this stuff and wanting to learn about it? Everybody has this stuff in their bodies.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I've said it multiple times, but it's not sexy. The medical stuff's not sexy. Like, it's not like, I just got a sub-second draw stroke out of concealment at 5 yards, that's sexy. But medical stuff, it's like, I just put a tourniquet on in under 15 seconds. It's like,
it's okay, bud. That's sexy to me.
Yeah. And it's gotten better. I think the last 2 years, the new kind of gun culture that's been being brought forth, that's really pushing field skills and just overall skills rather than just like you carry a gun and you train with your gun.
Yeah, it's not all about flat range shooting. It's more about actually being out in the woods and how to do distance shots and fieldcraft survival stuff, like whether that's just like making fires, making shelter, land navigation, all that good stuff. So knowing medical kind of falls into that, because it's like, if you're going to be prepared to be able to like self-sustain, you're going to have to be able to treat yourself or treat others that you're with.
Yeah.
So
if you can make holes, you need to know how to fill them.
Yep. In all aspects of life. Oh no. So what? Don't give me that look. So yeah, I think some first responder kind of basics that that I kind of wanted to go over right out the gate. I mean, if you didn't pay attention in high school in your biology classes, now's the time you've got the beautiful but somewhat crazy internet at your disposal. Use it, put it to work. You need to understand basic anatomy, really. I mean, this will help understand like what's going on. If you it doesn't need to be crazy. You don't have to become like,
a doctor,
a PhD. Yeah. You just do some research, understand, have a good solid understanding of the circulatory system, have a really good understanding of the respiratory system and the nervous system. And we call that the 3 Bs. So like when we do our training, you've got basically the 3 Bs is what you focus on: bleeding, breathing, and brain. And if you can kind of focus on the 3 of those things, you're going to have a pretty good, well-rounded foundation for dealing with injuries, especially like in the field or just in your everyday life as like a first responder. So understand that stuff. And you can go beyond, if you gain interest in something and you're like, man, I want to know, I want to know about the skeletal like system and start looking into that, and how many bones are in the body, and like, just have fun, research it. But not everybody wants to sit around and research biology stuff all day.
No.
So, and I know it's, again, it's not sexy, but this stuff's important. You got to understand just basic human anatomy. It's going to help you a lot. It's going to enable you to save people. It's going to make you, have a good idea of what could be going on. So
understanding what's happening kind of allows you to be able to figure out how to treat it if something's wrong.
Yeah. And another basic thing that everyone should work on is being able to stop bleeds. I think a lot of people get hyper focused on breathing, and bleeding can kill you a lot faster than not being able to breathe can.
Right.
So if you've got a arterial bleed, you can bleed out and die in minutes. So really, it's a seconds game. Every second matters. Whereas breathing, you can suffocate for a pretty long period of time. I mean, it's not great for you. You need to get oxygen into your body and into the brain, but you can suffocate a lot longer than you can bleed if you've got like arterial bleeds and stuff like that. But
so what are some really good, quick things to have in a kit? We're not going to explain every little detail, but for stop the bleed instances like what you're talking about, I would say a tourniquet is your best friend.
Oh yeah, for extremities, yeah, tourniquet for sure. And if you're not familiar with what a tourniquet is, look it up, man. Like you gotta understand this stuff. Tourniquet is one of the best medical devices for bleeding control out there. They're cheap. I mean, we all use and sell the North American Rescue CAT, which is the combat application tourniquet. It's a $30 medical device, and it's basically like a nylon and Velcro and kind of plastic construction device that you wrap around. You circumventionally wrap around a limb up high and tight, and you crank that thing down, and then it's got a windlass, which is basically like a rod that's got some ribbon attached to it. And when you twist this windlass, it's going to tighten the tourniquet and, tighten or close off, pinch down on the blood supply and close it off to the limb. So if you have an arterial bleed lower on a leg or an arm or something like that, you can tourniquet the limb and basically cut off all blood supply to keep you from losing your blood. So,
which in some instances, like where we're at, EMS isn't very far away. So that would probably be, for me, would be a number one thing to know how to use and carry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it should be nowadays with the way modern technology is. I mean, it used to be kind of and people still think it is, but it used to be basically if you put a tourniquet on, it was kind of treated as a last resort. It was like, hey, I need to get a tourniquet on. I've tried everything else, but you're going to lose your limb. And that's not the case anymore. Now you've got several hours. And there's good data out there now that's being presented that says that, in some cases up to 16. It does vary, but really you've got several hours that a tourniquet can be on and you'll get full function back in your limb. So now it's kind of it should be a first reaction. It should be, that tourniquet goes on high and tight at the very top of the limb, don't even mess around. There's people that do like 2 to 3 inches, or some people teach 2 to 3 inches above the wound. Especially like once you get into the civilian kind of medical provider side, like, I did EMT and stuff like that. They're wanting you to do 2 to 3 inches above and stuff. But for like a first responder level, just like dealing with this stuff as fast as possible, again, bleeding is a seconds game. You want to get that tourniquet on there as a first reaction. Basically, you see if you come upon somebody or it's you, first thing you should do is direct pressure to control bleeding. I mean, boom, direct pressure on that bleed. And then if you're working on somebody or whatever, if you've got a tourniquet available, that immediate reaction after that should be put that tourniquet on high and tight, crank that thing down until the bleeding stops, and write the time on it. A lot of tourniquets have like a time label on them.
Yeah, if that's not going to work, put it on their forehead.
The time?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you meant the tourniquet. I was like, whoa.
You have a problem thinking? I'm just going to...
Yeah, bandana style.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Write the time. If you can't record the time for whatever reason on the tourniquet, you can do it. You can write on their forehead or write on their chest or something like that. Just write like TQ and then write a time, and people will know what that means. So,
Didn't you say there was an instance when you were overseas that somebody had 2 tourniquets on for over 20 hours?
Yeah, so there's anecdotal stuff like that, but that's not the
standard.
That's an exception, I think. I think a lot more often than not, from a lot of the data I've looked at, once you go over that 16-hour mark, it starts getting pretty brutal. Like you're probably going to start looking at permanent nerve damage and potential limb loss. Yeah, but the point being, there have been cases. Yeah, there's been 20+ hour applications where they were able to maintain most of their mobility and their limbs.
Yeah.
So
there is just a massive misconception now. I was talking to my brother the other day, and we were talking about tourniquets. Tourniquets came up, and he's like, "Well, why would you do that when you can only have it on for 2 hours before you lose your limb?" And I was like, dude, that's not even close.
No.
I said, we're talking hours and hours and hours, not 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So he's like, well, why would you go straight to a tourniquet? I was like, well, because that's going to stop the bleed immediately. And now I've got 16, right around 16 hours to save this life and get EMS here.
Yeah.
So there's a massive misconception of tourniquets and the amount of time there is. But, and then there's also this misconception about, oh, well, I got a belt. I'll just take that off and I'll use a belt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A lot of old military guys, I'm not knocking, they just have had bad training.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, well, it honestly comes from a time, and you nailed it when you said old military guys, back before tourniquets were a thing, like actual medical device tourniquets.
Yeah.
Tourniquets have been around forever, like the actual, like making a tourniquet, out of like a stick and a triangular bandage or whatever. There's been people were using tourniquets to cut off blood supply back in, the World Wars, and I think even in the Civil War and stuff like that. So I think there was some use of it. So the actual, like, crafting a tourniquet has been around for a long time, but it's only until recently that they've actually, and I think it was in the 90s, I think you started seeing, things like the actual, like, CAT and other medical devices that were purpose-built to be tourniquets. So I think a lot of that comes from, it was a time where guys were serving and they were taught, improvise a tourniquet with a stick as a windlass and a triangular bandage. That's what they were taught. Or they were like, then somebody was like, well, you could use a belt. But, I think the whole kind of thought process now is it's like, why try to craft something, and make something work when there's actually a device that does it,
already a standard.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I mean, and I use this analogy a lot in our class. But yeah, for making a fire, it's like you can carry a
Bic lighter.
You can carry a flint and stone to like make sparks and make a fire. Sure, but wouldn't you just want to actually carry a lighter? Like carry a lighter. I mean, and then, you got people that are like, well, what if the lighter fails? It's like, okay, we'll carry two. I mean, you can literally carry 2 Bic lighters, and it's like the same weight as like a flint and steel kit.
That's so much weight, though.
And I know. But yeah, just, and I'm not saying don't, now you're going to have your guys like, you can't beat a good flint and steel. It's like, yeah, dude, carry your flint, you carry your fire striker. Like, I'm not saying don't do that, but point being, just because there's improvised ways to start a fire, there's also devices specifically designed to make a fire, and they do it with one motion,
Yeah.
So same with the medical device. Like, don't dink around with improvising tourniquets, because the statistics are terrible on them. Like,
what was it, 98.8 or 98.5% fail?
I can't remember exactly. It's around 98% of non-windlass improvised tourniquets fail.
Yeah.
So tourniquets with a windlass fail, like it's like in the 30s. It's like 33% of the time or something. I don't have them right in front of me, but whereas like an actual medical device tourniquet works, if applied properly, it does work, 99.99% of the time. So, yeah, I mean, the key is applying it properly. You got to know how to put it on. Pretty much all tourniquet failures are due to them being applied incorrectly. Even like, old CAT tourniquets, the windlass would break. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, I hate the CAT because the windlass breaks. It's like, well, yeah, because you didn't crank that thing on there tight enough right out the gate, and you didn't loop it through both sides. The old ones, you had to go through 2 sides on the tri-glide, on the feed through side. You applied it incorrectly, and you can only, if you don't get it on there super tight right out the gate, this goes for all tourniquets in general, then that windlass isn't going to do you a lot, and eventually you'll just be turning against the windlass and not creating any more tightness, and yeah, you'll break it. So
the key here is the right tool for the job and know how to use the tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So that requires training, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you got to get training on it. But other stop the bleed stuff that I think is important would be like packing gauze, like hemostatic gauze. And just really quick breakdown of that. Hemostatic gauze is a hemostatic, so hemo blood, static, still or stopped, not moving. So it's basically a gauze that has an impregnated agent in it that starts blood coagulation. So it promotes blood clotting. And Zeolin is a common one. Chitosan is another agent that's put in. Chitosan's pretty cool. It's actually derived from shellfish, but it's denatured, so there's no like allergic reactions or anything like that. But the really cool thing about chitosan is that it actually flips the positive negative basically in the blood. So
positive negative ions.
So it stops clotting instantly, or it starts clotting instantly on contact. I mean, it's cool. It's cool how it works. It's cool that they figured that out. Again, you're dealing with volume, like a lot of volume of blood loss if you're packing a wound, which, let me back up for a second. You pack a wound in the junctions. So the junctions are in between, or basically where all your limbs join into your torso. So like your legs join your torso, your arms join the torso. So basically.
Like groin, armpit.
Yep.
Groins and armpits, and then also kind of, I mean, you don't want to pack a ton into it, but like not your neck, but your trapped, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, like Steven said, you want to avoid packing there. If you can. I mean, there's that's kind of a controversial area, but yeah, your arms and legs, those junctions, you got to pack those spots if you got arterial bleeds. Which venous bleeding, just to kind of back up even farther, venous bleeding is usually controllable with just direct pressure. And direct pressure is like the number one thing that you should be doing for bleeding control. Like that's the first thing you should be doing. So just know that, I've seen it a lot. I actually just saw it recently with my wife. Like one of our kids, not to throw her under the bus, she was just like worried about our kid, but one of our kids fell and bonked his head on the corner of the table. It wasn't even very hard. It was just enough to like punch a little hole in his forehead, and heads bleed really bad. But it's usually not going to be life threatening. There's just a lot of capillaries and stuff in our face. So lots of blood. The cool thing about it though, is you just get a little bit of direct pressure and you can stop it in a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But she kind of panicked and was like, and she's kind of sitting there just looking at it, not really knowing what to do. And I was like, well, just hold pressure on it. And sure enough, get a napkin really quick, put it on there, held pressure on his forehead for about 2 minutes, and it's clotted up, stopped bleeding, put a Band-Aid on it, good to go. And, kids kind of freak out too. Like he was scared and blood was kind of flying around and, and he was trying to kind of not sure what to do. So, but yeah, it worked out. And then, I kind of explained it to him, and, cause he's only 3, and I was just like, look, buddy, like we get to put a cool Band-Aid, that whole thing. And then it was like all cool. And he was like looking in the mirror, like I got a Band-Aid on, So, but yeah, that's just one example. But even like a pretty severe venous bleed, yeah, you might have to get stitches, but you can control the bleeding with direct pressure. But arterial bleeds, that's like a really important part to know. Arterial bleeds. So
what color blood is that?
We're just going to run our whole class here.
We're talking about arterial bleeds. Might as well identify it.
Okay, so the difference between a venous bleed and arterial bleed. One, venous comes from your veins, obviously. Arterial bleeds come from your arteries. Your arteries run away from your heart, and they're high pressure systems, so they're moving blood at high pressure.
Oxygenated blood.
It's oxygenated blood, correct. Venous bleeding goes back to the heart and kind of cycles it back. It gets rid of toxins on the way back, and it's unoxygenated. So pretty much blood that's already been used up. The oxygen's already been depleted.
So
the
arterial blood?
Yeah, arterial blood is bright red, and it's usually, it can be kind of foamy even.
Fascinating.
Josh just playing just ignoramus over
crazy. There. So bright red, can be foamy, but spurting. If you've got an arterial bleed, it's going to spurt out. It's going to actually spray out. Like that's like, when you watch the movies and like blood like squirts out, a lot of times that's always pretty unrealistic, but that's, kind of what an arterial bleed would be. It's, you can YouTube it, and I encourage you to, YouTube arterial bleed, and you'll see some videos. It can be a little gross, but it's worth knowing. And then a venous bleed is dark red and usually oozes from the wound. So, kind of flows. But it can be dangerous too. Don't. I'm not trying to say venous bleeding's not dangerous. I mean, in heavy volumes, venous bleeding, I mean, you're going to bleed out. So you got to stop it as well. The key is just you control all bleeding. That's the key.
That's the number one step.
Yeah.
On our March card.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a little bit. We are going to talk a little bit about a good acronym you can use, so we'll cover that later. But, yeah, so I guess good gear for that, for stopping the bleed, would be tourniquet for limbs, and that would be for arterial bleeds. For venous bleeding, you can use just direct pressure, so like some gauze, just like regular gauze. Pressure dressings are awesome. Emergency trauma dressing is ETD, is a common acronym you'll see. And have emergency trauma dressing. They make them in a bunch of different sizes. North American Rescue makes like 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, 10-inch, and then like all these specialty sizes for abdomens and stuff like that. Those are awesome. They're super versatile. You can use them for, pretty much any venous bleed. You can use them. You just put it on there, hold pressure, and then it'll stop the bleed. And if it's not too saturated, you can then use it to dress up the injury. So hemostatic gauze is going to be for junctions. And you can also use hemostatic gauze for bleeds past a tourniquet in the limb if you can't control it with the tourniquet alone. So if you put a tourniquet on and it's still bleeding pretty heavily, you can pack it. Another thing is that you can do is if you got 2 tourniquets, you can use 2 tourniquets, right?
Yeah. Yep. Just, I don't want to go too in depth on the podcast just because some of the stuff, I don't know. It's different types of learners. So audio learners do well, but I do well with pictures and stuff like that because I'm a dum-dum. But, yeah, you can, just as long as you apply the tourniquet directly above the tourniquet that's already in place.
Yeah.
Don't put a gap in it because that's
where you don't want any limb segment.
Yep. So
you can offset the windlasses so they're as close together as possible. But yeah, that happens a lot on like big muscular thighs. You'll see it a lot on, combat injuries and stuff like that. But
guys that got a lot of rucking in them legs.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you two gentlemen, just old thicky thighs.
Yeah, we kind of thunder our thighs around, that's for sure. But yeah, that's good stop the bleed stuff. And then, just basic bandages and stuff like that for dressing. Like I said, emergency trauma dressing, you can do so much with it. But so yeah, that's basically bleeding. Focus on bleeding, understand how to stop it, understand the anatomy of the circulatory system enough to know kind of how it all works. That goes into shock. Like you need to understand like hypovolemic shock, what that is. It's about the fluid compartment of your body, and I don't want to. We've already gotten a lot more complicated and kind of in the weeds than I wanted to. So, but look into this stuff, understand it. You've got 5 liters of blood in the body. You really only got 2 though. Like you can lose about 2 before you're in those later stages of shock, and it's fatal. You'll die. Basically, your body can't replenish blood supply, and you'll die. So,
and you can find information on all this stuff, and whether that may be through YouTube or just Googling on the internet. But then also there's plenty of companies that are running trainings for this kind of stuff as well.
Oh yeah.
Obviously we run a training, and ours is a 16-hour 2-day course. So, it's a lot of information, and it's also a lot of hands-on stuff, which is nice because you're actually getting to physically work on these individual things, whether that's bleeders, breathing, brain. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So what I was going to ask is what made you to decide to go this route of training medically and just getting the word out, and what got you interested in actually practicing overseas?
What got me interested? Well, as far as the overseas side of it goes, that was just like my job. Like,
so you were just told to do it.
Yeah.
You were like, okay.
I was selected as the secondary my platoon's secondary medic. So you have a medic. I was in the Army. So in the Army, you have a 68 Whiskey who's a combat medic. You have one assigned to each infantry platoon. I was an infantryman, but then at least my unit did. I don't know if your unit did this, Stephen, or how common it is, but my unit basically picked.
Yeah, but did you have one medic for your entire?
No, each platoon had a medic.
Okay.
Yeah. But so what my unit did, or at least my company did, it was my whole unit because our class was big. They basically picked one person from each platoon to then become what they called like the secondary medic. So they sent me to EMT school and then advanced combat lifesaver. So it was like basically a more in-depth CLS, which is combat lifesaver, which is a class that every infantryman gets.
I see.
So yeah, I did a bunch of training, like extra training which was basically with the medics, like the medics in my unit, like put on this advanced course and, ran us through it, and we did scenarios and got blood sprayed at our faces and stuff like that. And so, and the kind of the concept behind it was, if the medic gets injured, we need somebody else out there that has at least enough information to keep that person alive and then keep others alive, So that's kind of what that was. And then, like my vehicle was the CASEVAC, which is the casualty evacuation. It was the CASEVAC vehicle. So we had kind of like, I was part of the kind of the medical response plan and team and stuff. So it just, all that training and just things overseas that we saw, I had a lot of stuff didn't really gross me out. Things didn't really bother me. And so I just kind of built an interest and then kind of kept pursuing it after the military, and was going to become a nurse and was doing college and stuff for that. And then basically, long story short, DDS kind of became what we were hoping it could start to become. And I was like, man, the only way I can really get where we need to get with this is if I dedicate all my time to it. So decided to put down the medical field dreams and kind of do this. And it's just led to, obviously we're instructors now for basic lifesaver, CPR, first aid, AD, child and adult, stop the bleed stuff, active shooter kind of stuff. So we've got all those instructor certs now, and it's just been kind of a continuation of some of that stuff that I've done in the past. I mean, my actual EMT certification is expired. I didn't re-up it, but part of me wants to at least go get that again. But just to re-up it, maybe do the next level. But I don't know. It's always been like I'm academically interested in it. But I'm really passionate mainly about, I've seen how well it works. I've seen how well, these simple techniques you can learn actually work in real life. I've seen people get saved and stuff like that by just simple things. And dude, it's just like everyone should know this stuff. So I'm just passionate about it. And
I've seen how it doesn't work because I wasn't trained. So then there's that side of things too. Once you go through something like that, then you're like, well, I guess I need training because I don't want that to ever happen again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's that side of it as well. And I mean, I've been fortunate to have like very early on, not have to experience very much, in my like younger years, and then getting all this like medical training pretty early in my adulthood. So I haven't been caught in very many situations. Like I've been kind of first on scene in a lot of car accidents and stuff. It just happened to be in the right place at the right time, or wrong place at the wrong time, however you want to think about that. For me, it's right place at the right time. And get there and not be too intimidated. I've been able to come up on scene and be like, all right, cool. Like start running AVPU, which is, basically that's just an acronym for checking someone's alertness, and their responsiveness level. So, coming up, talking to them or not talking to them if they're unconscious. And, it's just been kind of like boom, boom, boom. And then more often than not, EMS is there. And then they're like, oh, sweet. Like, and I'm like, I'm holding C-spine or whatever, and they're just like, cool. You mind if you just keep doing that while we do some stuff? I'm like, yeah. And then they'll be like, get out of our way. I'm like, I'm out of here. So,
yeah, my back hurts anyway. I'm done with this.
Yeah, right. And Steven,
Yeah, kind of same thing for me. I mean, I've come up on a lot of different car crashes and just medical emergencies through my life, but fortunately enough, I didn't have anything happen too traumatic in my high school years that I can remember, really. Besides, like, your just typical stuff like busting your head open and stuff like that, or people having that happen to them. But, yeah, so pretty much every time I've had to respond to something, it hasn't been that intimidating because I've had the training prior, I guess.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, again, that's kind of where I started. Is I've come across way too many instances where, I guess in my childhood, and I wasn't too young to be able to do CPR, but somebody was laying in the road, and it was just like, it was odd. You know, he was laying like he had a heart attack, and I'm pretty sure he did. A larger gentleman, but, you know, I was looking at my dad because he was there too. He went over there. The old man didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
At all. So that's kind of where the journey started. And then I just started running into other things like, again, people laying on sidewalks, like car accidents. And then I started getting into more of the firefighting side of things.
Yep. Because you got a firefighting background.
Yeah. It wasn't very long.
Yeah.
But the stuff that I ran into was, one of the calls I had was a suicide. We didn't know it at the time, but the guy had, you know, offed himself. And so I was a younger gentleman coming into that. And yeah, it's pretty hard to go through some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and so at that point I didn't want to pursue firefighting anymore because that was a little bit too much for me.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty shocking.
It is. It's super shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because certain things like the kind of chair the guy was sitting in, I see that stuff around.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah, dude.
You know, so that's pretty hard stuff. So after that, I started to think about these things of, you know, how could you help somebody like that who had missed or didn't do the job correctly?
Yeah.
Could you actually go in there and treat that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, I know one thing led to another, and somehow we met in plumbing school.
Yeah, we did.
How many years ago was that?
Oh, dude, I don't know. I'm terrible. Like, you ask me anything about the time, and I'm like, yeah, it was a few years ago. Like
it had
it
to
was
be
like
7 or 8
ago.
years.
No, yeah, it was
like
back
2014, right?
Yeah, the very beginning of 2014.
It was like right when I was getting out. You guys Jacob was starting to do the pipe fitters stuff.
Yep, Plumbing and Pipe Fitters Union.
Yeah, so 8 years ago, we were just a couple of dum-dums just sitting in a plumbing class, and now we're here on a podcast talking about medical and doing awesome things in this.
I actually remember there was another vet in that class, another infantry guy, and you know, infantry guys find each other and kind of smash in. Like, yeah, hey, what unit were you with? I was with this. You know, yeah, where were you at? I was here, and like, you know, and then before you know it, you're just sitting together. And I remember going through the CPR first aid class that we had to do there, and them just teaching weird stuff. And we were like, respectfully, and like, I remember saying something and then him being like, well, and then the other guy that was the other infantry guy was like, no, it's true. I agree, blah, blah, blah. And we just we're like, just so you know, in the real situation, this is how you want to stop bleeding. And they were all just kind of like, oh, okay. Didn't know that. And, but yeah, back then, I mean, they were teaching like no tourniquets, you know, like don't use a tourniquet and stuff like that. And we were like, no, you definitely should use a tourniquet. They work. But just trying not to be a bunch of, you know, know-it-alls, but at the same time being like,
just that young dumb apprentice.
People die. Yeah.
You know nothing.
What do you know? You know, yeah. Classic. But yeah, and then so I guess kind of jumping back into CPR a little bit. I highly encourage you to take a course. They're cheap too. They're usually like anywhere you can take. Supposedly you can take. Well, not supposedly. I know for a fact you can take ones online now.
No.
not worth it.
Don't do that.
I think they're stupid. I mean, you can get, if you want to do something online, you can get better quality information out of a YouTube video. Like we have one, for example. So if you wanted to go watch it, it covers like CPR on an adult and an infant, and it covers uses of using an AED. But go take a class because they cover a lot. They cover like first aid stuff too, and they're usually like anywhere between $50 and $100, right around in there. Super affordable. It's just good info to have. And then
try to go into that class, not a check the box, but an intent to learn.
Yeah,
make it important because it is.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, use that as a springboard. Use that as kind of a launching point to get into other stuff. You can start looking into other trauma, injuries, and how to deal with more, kind of more specific, more life-threatening stuff. That stuff can be complicated, and it usually requires a lot of training. So that's where I would start looking into like who offers, different training, and like Steven mentioned, we do, and you can take training from North American Rescue, and there's all kinds of stuff like that that you can learn from. But yeah, and then the other thing too that I think is often not thought about or neglected is like having good meds. This is something more from like a survival kind of point of view, but there's simple things you can have and start to learn about that are really good. Like just simple like antibiotic creams and ointments and stuff like that would be really good. Name
a few for me because I still need to learn a little bit of what you're talking about here.
Well, like ibuprofen, painkillers.
Gotcha. Yep.
Mostly over the counter stuff, but if you can, I mean, especially for like if you're preparing for,
end of the world,
kind of, yeah, or at least end of the world as you know it,
yeah.
Kind of environments where you have, there's no infrastructure really anymore. So like antibiotics would be really good. Antihistamines, which are like anti-allergy kind of stuff. Like pain meds like ibuprofen, Tylenol, things like that. Antiseptics, things that are going to clean cuts and injuries, and
absolutely. And knowing how to apply properly.
Yeah,
like anything else.
Yeah.
Or used properly.
If you live in areas where you've got like poisonous plants, having creams and ointments that can deal with that, we're very fortunate to not have like poison ivy or anything like that here.
Thank you for Alaska.
Worry about it. I think
we do have poison oak or something.
I think it's invasive, but I think it doesn't do well here. But
no,
we have
it doesn't it's not like everywhere. But I think
we have that cowpersnip or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
it's like stinging nettles is what I called it as a kid.
And then Devil's Club.
And apparently you can eat that.
Really?
Yeah, I've eaten it before, which is super
apparently.
But
you've eaten it. Well, I hope you. Obviously, you can eat it because you've eaten it.
Tastes like lettuce.
Really?
Yep.
Crazy.
And it doesn't sting your mouth. How weird is that?
That is weird.
Yeah, like Benadryl though, and aspirin, and just your typical stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Benadryl. Yeah, Benadryls are really good because for like allergic reactions and stuff. Yep. Laxatives are good too. If you're getting like stopped up from eating your MRE every single day, then a laxative could be good. Yeah. And then the reverse as well, getting medicine that helps you if you're having like constant diarrhea or if you get like beaver fever or something like that because you drink unfiltered water. Having those meds as well. So just simple stuff that you should just kind of stock up and have.
Or just drink really unfiltered water.
Yeah. Have a working knowledge of it at the bare minimum.
Yeah. Yeah. With that, honestly, water filtration. You have that. I mean, that's getting into more. I don't want to get into like the fieldcraft side of it because that'll be a different podcast. But that's all goes into maintaining yourself. It's preventative medicine. That's doing stuff it's doing things to keep you from needing it. That's what our medic actually always said. Like anytime we did training and stuff like that, he was really cool. He always wanted to be like one of the infantry guys. Like he was always wanting to kick doors in and stuff. And our platoon sergeant would give him crap and be like, "You don't need to be doing this. You need to be practicing, dressing wounds and stuff. And he's like, no, Sergeant. He's like, this is preventative medicine, which I always thought was pretty cool. But yeah, he was always wanting to be involved with the infantry tactics and stuff. But
I think that's every 68 whiskey though.
Yeah,
that's assigned to an infantry unit.
They're basically just a smart infantryman, like academically smart. They're able to be a medic and learn all the anatomy and everything, and not be a dar, but also they want to be out there fighting. So yeah, I mean, I think a really good kind of getting into an acronym you can use to assess someone. So it's a medical term it's a pretty common medical term, but it's referred to as assessment. And basically all that means is you're, coming up on an injury or a patient or a victim or whatever, casualty, whatever you want to call it. And you're trying to figure out what's wrong with them. And there's a really cool, simple acronym that you can use, and it's called MARCH. And it's been around for a long time, and it's MARCH. And I'll just kind of run through it really quick, but basically what it stands for is massive hemorrhage, airway, respirations, circulation, and then hypothermia and head injury. So that's what the acronym MARCH stands for. And then it's nice because it helps you remember and kind of prioritize. So massive hemorrhage meaning like major bleed, arterial bleed, very, very heavy bleeding. That would be considered massive hemorrhage. And under that, basically you direct pressure to try to stop the bleed. You're going to tourniquet high and tight if you need to on like extremities. You're going to use packing gauze and junctions, hemostatic packing gauze in any of the junctions. You would apply pressure dressings if you've got any major bleeding and penetrations in the torso. And then, you would have to reassess those wounds and stuff like that. But so that's basically how you deal with massive hemorrhage. And then airway, you're basically checking it, making sure that they're bleeding. You can use things like the head tilt chin lift or jaw thrust, which are just methods to open the airway. So
yeah, look, listen, feel.
Yeah.
Know what's going on. Don't just like look and be like, I think. But actually get your ear down there, get your eyes down there, looking across the chest.
Yep.
You're going to be feeling if they're breathing against your ear, listening if they're breathing, looking, rise and fall of the chest. I mean, we can go through the motions, but if it doesn't give us any data of what's actually going on, then it doesn't help you.
Yep. Yeah, you can use, there's airway devices you can use to secure, like NPA or nasopharyngeal is, a lot of people will probably see them. It's like that green tube. It's like a green silicone tube that gets pushed in the
just
nostril.
The old green willy, dude.
Yeah. And those are nice because it's a physical device that helps secure the airway. It can kind of hold the tongue forward and keep the tongue from rolling back in the throat and making people suffocate on their own tongue. But one of the best things you can do is use positioning. So you like the recovery or the rescue position is a pretty common one, and it's basically rolling the patient in a way. This is mainly if they're unconscious, but rolling them in a way to where their saliva, blood, or any fluids that might get trapped in their mouth are going to drain out onto the ground. You use gravity to help you. And then they can kind of maintain themselves as long as they're breathing and you're reassessing them in that position. But yeah, airway, basically all you're doing is you're making sure it's clear. You're making sure they're not choking on something, making sure they're actually breathing. And if they're not breathing, then that's where you would jump into CPR at that point.
Which is the respirations on your card. Just helping them out. Yeah, so
respirations is the next letter, and in March, and airway and respirations kind of go hand in hand. I mean, airway is like the physical airway. It's literally checking and making sure that they can and are breathing. And then respirations is getting into like looking, listening, feeling, making sure that they've got good rise and fall. They're not, looking at like the quality of their breathing. Are they labored breathing? Are they like distressed? Are they wheezing? Are they like gasping for air? These are all things you want to pay attention to. And then, if you're having problems figuring stuff out or nothing's making sense, you can start exposing. Like you can look at their chest to make sure they don't have like a chest penetration or something like that. And if you need to seal up with an occlusive dressing or something like that. You might have to find that as you're checking like quality of breathing.
I've been very exposed this weekend. Just know in a medical emergency or stance.
Just no context.
In a medical emergency or stance, cut those clothes off so you can see. I mean, it's important to be able to see.
Are you gonna give any context
on
that? The fact that you just said I've been very exposed this weekend.
Look, hold on, I'll get to it.
All right,
I'm just lining up the old hit off
build
the
up.
Old, yeah, exactly. So we do a lot of scenario training, and we come to certain situations where people are just like, "Oh, a body, I'm uncomfortable. Oh, I'm touching a man." Like, you just, when it becomes medical, you got to look past all that. Like, I'm gonna touch somebody weird.
Yeah,
you got to look past it, and you got to get those trauma shears out and just. I mean, obviously, if it makes sense, expose them. You're not going to just be like, oh, this person's sleeping, let's expose them.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about.
If things aren't making sense, if you're like, why is this breathing so stupid right now?
Yeah,
I can't see anything obvious.
Out of nowhere.
No. Josh is like, no.
That's not.
He's like, that is not what I wanted at all.
So the context is when we do our trauma response training, we do the last half of the second day, or a good chunk of the second day, is scenario training, hands-on. We have like mouillage wounds. They're like simulated injuries. We got simulated blood. It's pretty realistic. We're actually pretty proud of how much we put into it and what it's become. And we keep trying to make it better and better. But Josh is the lucky candidate that gets to basically be
just flop on
the injured
flop on
man.
The ground like a fish.
Yeah, he's always he's the actor. He's a very good. He puts on his Broadway hat and he gets out there and his Broadway hat and his mouillage broken shin bone.
I wouldn't say Broadway, but I sure have fun doing it.
It's realistic for like the first 5 minutes, and then it just becomes you laughing at them.
That's because they're whispering sweet nothings in my ear, and I just cannot hold it together.
No, we definitely try to have fun with it, but we definitely take it super serious. So it's basically no holds barred. I mean, you know, if you need to put a tourniquet on Josh, then you put a tourniquet on Josh. If you got to pack one of our mouillage wounds, then you pull out packing gauze and you pack it. You know, if you got to do a chest seal,
you got a penetration, you're dressing that penetration. If you got
to cut clothes off, you're cutting
broken
clothes
legs,
off.
you're splitting them
clothes off.
You're splitting up broken wounds. You're putting on chest seals if you have, you know, penetrations, whether that's gunshots or whatever it may be,
or guts hanging out like eviscerations.
Yeah,
that gets them. They're just like, oh.
Yeah, that evisceration, we always get a pretty good reaction out of that.
Yeah, like when John was
injury.
like, is that poop coming out of it?
Yeah, because it's actually a perforated bowel is what that specific little mouillage injury we have is. And it actually has stuff inside it. If you squeeze it and feel it, it's really nasty feeling.
Crazy.
I love it.
You should feel it on your own body. It feels even weirder.
I bet. I haven't actually had it put on me. I'm always the proctor. I'm always like, they're like, do I have a good pulse? I'm like, nope, it's weak and thready. You know, I'm that guy. But
it's hard to be that guy, though, sometimes.
I know.
I don't want to be that guy.
When we run the big classes and we have 2 actors and me and you are both being like running a lane each.
Yeah.
I've only got to do it once yet, so.
Yeah.
But
you definitely have to know your stuff. Like, that's the thing about it. Yeah.
You have to like know. Which makes sense why whenever we're getting set up, you're like, what's the injury? So that way it's like, you know where to go with what the actor's going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be kind of funny, though. Josh is trying at the beginning. He's like, just don't give any details to Jacob. I'm just going to go for it. And I was like, well, he's not going to know where. That's what you said. You remember that?
I was joking because we were just like, well, why does he need that? And I was like, well, just don't give him anything then.
Oh, okay. Because you were like, no, he's going to know where I'm going. And I was like, I don't think he is, because you were going to like go into shock and stuff. I was like, dude, that'd be so hard for Jacob just to be like, well, he's unconscious now.
Yeah.
I love like the little social cues that you give me. Like, you're just like, you give me these like closed eyes and like you're feigning, and I'm just like, yep, got the cue. I'm going under.
Yeah, because sometimes we do a little audible in the middle of the thing, and it's usually if they make a mistake or if they go a weird direction that I wasn't expecting them to go, and I'm like, oh, that wasn't that's not good. So
That's
let's
not something
have Josh have a
to prioritize.
reaction. And Josh knows what's going on too, so he's usually really good about being like, like reacting to them doing something incorrectly, in a way. And it's fun, man. But yeah, it cracked me up yesterday because I came in and they were super hyper focused and excited. Steven and Josh were on like the injury. They had like their artistry. They had Josh all set up. They're like, look at this. This is going to be
like
a good
the makeup
one.
artist.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, but what's the scenario?
I'm the director.
And Steven's like, what do you mean? Steven's like, look, it's this. And I was like, I know, but like, what happened though? And he's like, it doesn't matter. Like, we just got, and I was like, no, I know, but like, what's going to happen? Because I need I need the information so I can progress this thing along. And then they're like, oh yeah. No, this is what's going to happen.
The backstory, dude.
Yeah. But yeah. So, anyways, back to exposure. Josh got exposed a lot. No, but yeah, you just don't be afraid to start searching around. A lot of people call it getting the patient trauma naked, which just means like you clear everything that's necessary out of there and get it out of your way when you're working on them. But again, if it's not necessary, you don't need to do it. We don't need to be out in the field just stripping people down for no reason. So, but yeah, and then the C in March is circulation, and that's checking for checking pulse. There's a term called capillary refill, and that's basically if you actually take your index finger and you push in on it, you'll make like a depressed bed in your finger where you basically push all the blood out of it, and then it'll refill. And that should be about 2 seconds on average. 2.5 seconds, right around in there. Some people are a little faster, some people are slightly slower, and that's good to know. That's good to know for yourself. Figure out, check all around your body, check your arm, check your fingers, check your hands, see what your cap refill is, and just kind of have that information. You should know what yours is on average.
Yeah, and get in there and start checking pulses. The amount of people that have no clue on where or how, it's pretty staggering. It's like at least 95% of people, if not more.
Just throwing out random percentages.
From what I know from scenarios.
Did he just throw a percentage out there?
Yeah, 95%.
95%, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Nobody knows. Even yesterday. Like what? One person knew how to do it?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, we
two
teach
classes ago. Yeah, we teach it, but they don't know how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is a little bit of a feel thing. It's one of those things that once you get it, you're like, oh, and you can just get it on pretty much everybody. But yeah, practice that. I agree with that. I'm glad you brought that up. Like, practice on yourself, like look it up. Just type in Google, how do I feel for a pulse? And it'll come up. It'll show you where to push. And, you can do it on the wrist. You can do it down by the ankle. You can do it on the neck. There's a bunch of different places you can check for it. You can do it like it kind of in certain spots of like right underneath the calf. Like there's all kinds of places you can check for a pulse, but that's good stuff. Like that's stuff you should just do, and you can just passively do it on yourself while you're at work, for no reason. And then, get good at
checking like all your time, extremities and
your
head, which is technically extremity, I guess, but
yeah. It's the extremity. Well, maybe not all of your extremities, but I don't know if
no.
Anyways, Josh's face.
We're going places.
No, that's the whole point. We're not going places. Anyways, I derailed myself. Where is it going with this?
Circulation, checking pulse.
Okay. Also, get good at counting your beats per minute. So count how many beats you have in 15 seconds, multiply that by 4, and that's what your BPM is. So know what your resting heart rate is. Maybe go on a run and check your your working heart rate. Yeah. I mean, this is just stuff that you should just practice on yourself. It's just easy. The other thing in circulation that you're looking at is like skin quality. If it's cool, clammy, pale, you're also kind of doubling back on like the type of breathing. Is it rapid? Is it shallow? What kind of breathing you got going on? These are things that you can check while you're in circulation. And then getting into H, the final letter, is hypothermia and head. So got to keep people warm. I think there's a misconception that hypothermia only affects people in the cold. That if you're out in the cold and you're out in the Arctic and you're trying to survive in the wilderness, you can die of hypothermia. But no, you can get it. You can go into hypothermia due to shock. If you've lost too much blood and your body's unable to regulate its temperature, you're able to, or you're now,
unable to regulate your temperature, body temperature.
Yep. Thank you. And then in there too, you're checking the head. So there's looking for head injury. In the field, there's not a ton of things you can do for the head, but you can check eyes, pupil, like unequal sized pupils is a big one. Bleeding from the ears would be a really serious one.
Pupil dilation as well, right?
Yeah, I just said unequal sized pupils, but you're talking about like
checking with the light.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. Yeah, constriction to light, or dilate, if it does or doesn't. These are things that you can check. But also just the mental state, are they disoriented? Are they agitated? Are they belligerent? Are they delirious? These are things that you should be paying attention to throughout your assessment, especially if you've got someone that's conscious.
Yeah.
Honestly, both. Pay attention to what they're doing. Do they start like twitching around at all? If they're unconscious, or like if they're conscious, were they chill and they were doing good? Now all of a sudden they're like way super relaxed. And you're like, what's going on? And they seem super sleepy, or they start getting like confused and they like don't remember you being there. Just anything that seems odd, it'll stick out to you.
Yeah, there was a friend of mine who was biking, and I know you guys have heard this before, but he was biking and got hit by a car, and he pretty much had half of his face peeled off. But he went over there to the guardrail, sat down, and EMS showed up, and he's sitting there. I'm fine. Just repeating that. I'm fine. No, I'm fine. But half of his face is like peeled off. That's a worrisome state of mind.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely not normal, so it's abnormal. It'll stick out to you. And so yeah, those are the things that you pay attention to that. And that could be signs of a head injury. It could be signs of blood loss, going into shock. You start to lose the ability to control, to maintain your homeostasis, which is basically your natural balance.
Right. And some of the stuff, with the brain, we can't help you, but we suspected injury. We could probably get you in C-spine, because chances are if your head is injured, your neck is injured as well. So
yeah, you can do preventative stuff. But the knowledge is power. The more information you have, the better you'll do. And, like you're not going to be able to do brain surgery, right? There are, in all of these aspects, like we talked about the 3 Bs earlier, you got bleeding, breathing, and brain. All 3 of those have levels to them where you're just not going to be able to deal with it. But I think having a good basic understanding of this stuff is so critical, and it's really easy. But we're going to do more episodes in the future on, like really breaking down March and going through step by step. Like, might be cool to do like a scenario or something where we have like, come up with some different scenarios and kind of go through assessment. That might be kind of cool. But yeah, this is going to be a recurring topic. I think the biggest thing was just kind of getting in and breaking down the mindset, having the responder mindset, and, just stop buying kits filled with medical gear that you have never touched or used or know anything about, and nothing against people that have done this, but I've had so many customers come in and they look at our medical section and they buy these really fancy IFAKs, and then like a few months later they come back and they're like, hey, by the way, what is this? I opened up my kit for the first time and I don't know what this is. And I'm like, oh, that's emergency trauma dressing. And they're like, well, what is that? I'm like, okay, well, it's used for this. And we start like talking about it. And then eventually I just have to be like, I feel like a turd, but eventually I gotta be like, dude, I'm not trying to make you spend more money, but you should come to our class. Like, we literally go through all of this stuff. You'll know what everything is in that kit, and you'll be very confident in using all of it. And then they're just like, okay, yeah, well, maybe I should, and, or, I'm like, hey, we'll get through and explain it. And they'll be like, oh, that makes sense. But it's it's easy. We've said this before about stuff. It's easy to buy the gear. That's the easiest part. To go out and buy it, slap it on your stuff. Now you're a cool guy. You got a sick IFAK on your battle belt or plate carrier or whatever, and that's awesome. But knowing how to use this stuff, I mean, it's literally just weight. You're just literally carrying around random weight if you don't know how to use it.
Yeah. So what you say all the time is that your brain reverts back to the last training that you've had.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to get there with a massive bleed that you've never trained on and be like, yep, I can do that. No.
Yeah.
You're going to be panicking and doing a lot of things very incorrectly.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to cause more harm to the patient.
Yeah.
Or somebody you're working on.
Which, yeah, that's like, and that right there is one of the main, like, thought processes of being a first responder. Is you hear it a lot in the medical community, but it's first do no harm. So basically saying, like, don't do something. You're not going to do something to the patient that's going to injure them further. That's your first kind of, it's your first priority is like, we need to make sure we don't hurt them further. We need to do things that are going to help them. So you're exactly right. And you gotta have the abilities, you gotta have the training and the knowledge to do it. So yeah, that's the big thing. Like if you've invested in medical gear, awesome. You're on the right track, but back that up with some good training.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying go spend money and to go take some super expensive class. Is a class going to be superior to just learning like on the internet? Absolutely. Because if it's a good class, you're going to get hands-on training. You're going to get visual, audio, and, written, like learning and write. You're going to have all of the learning avenues covered if you go to a physical class. But there's really good sources on YouTube. There's great sources on the internet in general. There's so much information. That's one of the good things about coming out of a 20 plus year conflict, being in two different countries, is that you get a lot of data on trauma and general like life-saving pre-hospital setting stuff.
Yeah, and you got to get your reps in with that stuff. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yep.
I mean, you're
just
not
like
training
anything.
on it. I mean, it's just like not shooting a gun for 10 years and you think you're going to be the best shot ever. No, probably not.
Yeah.
And especially since things change, like things are always changing. So you got to stay up on it in order to keep up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we just had documentation come out. You said February?
Yeah.
That changed multiple things, that we changed how we're doing things now.
Yeah. So, I mean, you got to stay up to date on this stuff. I mean, you've got to, it's an ever-changing thing, and that's a good thing. Like, I've heard a lot of people say, man, it's frustrating because they keep changing it, and it's like, no, it's good because they're finding new methods. They're getting new data. Like, it takes time to get data. They compile statistics and look at trends, and the medical industry as a whole is extremely good at documentation. It's almost like too much, but they keep a ton of documentation on this stuff, and they figure out what works and figure out what doesn't, and they subtract all the weird pharmaceutical stuff and how that can influence things. But from just like usually in the pre-hospital setting, that data is really well compiled and gone through very finely and professionally. And so they're always finding new ways to do things that are better, increased chances of survival. And, they come out with new medical devices. So good things to look for too in medical devices is things that are TCCC approved. The TCCC is the Tactical Committee for Combat Casualty Care.
Oh, you don't want China approved?
China approved, yeah. Actually, I said that wrong. It's the CTCCC is the Committee for Tactical Combat Casualty Care. That's that. But so if you find they approve devices, and if they've approved devices, they've gone through a long, extensive trial, and I recommend sticking to those. Don't fall for the snake oil. There's a lot of snake oil out there. There's a lot of products that say they're one thing or they claim to be like, you'll see a lot that a lot of products say something along the lines of like, pending TCCC approval or something. And it's like, well, that could mean it could get denied, or there's all kinds of weird little shady things that you'll see, but just stick to TCCC approved and recommended medical devices across the board, and you'll be good, especially for the trauma stuff.
Yeah, just a safe way to go.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, I can't stress it enough. I mean, if you're taking this stuff serious and you're really kind of trying to be that modern day Minuteman, being adept with medical ability and being able to respond in a medical fashion is just part of it. It's not like you should do this. It's just like this is part of the bag. Like this is something that you need to have in your skill bag. I mean, I just don't think I think it's mandatory. I don't think there's an excuse. I think if you train with firearms, this is something you do.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely mandatory. And it's kind of crazy because even I would say most of the people that train like tactically or whatever, train for preparedness, they do have med kits. Like,
yeah,
I don't remember which podcast we were talking about that. It's like, and you were just talking about it just now, but it's easy to buy the gear. That's the easy part because it's, I don't know, it's one more thing that looks good. It looks good on your belt, or it looks good in a dangler pouch on your chest rig or plate carrier or whatever. You look like you're doing the part, but if you don't know how to use it, it's not any good. It's like, cool, man, you had a sweet picture for Instagram, but if you don't know how to use it, why does it matter?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, if you bring in your kit and you open it up and you've still got your cat tourniquet all sealed up in the vacuum packing, and it's like, and it's still stowed away and like with the tag on it and everything. It's like, dude, yeah, we got to get that stuff prepped, get it ready for use, get this stuff ready to grab and go.
Seconds count.
I mean, there's certain things that need to stay in the vacuum. You got to keep things sterile, so there's a difference. But like your immediate use devices need to be ready for immediate use. So yeah. I mean, it's really just common sense stuff. I mean, I think as we kind of wrap up, the main thing I want to leave you with is, I know medical stuff can be really intimidating. It should be. I mean, it's serious. You're starting to deal with like mortality when you get into this. When we get on the range and train, you're shooting at paper targets, stuff like that. It's like, you're working on your individual skill. There's a level of separation there. Sometimes I think with medical though, it gets real really fast for people, and I think people get uncomfortable and intimidated by it and overwhelmed by how much they have to do. But the best way to work on that and the best way to get through that is just to start. And I think going back, like what Josh and we were all saying, is CPR first aid is a great place to start. I don't think it should be the end all be all. I mean, it's very, very basic. But you can springboard off of that into other things. You can start looking at, stop the bleed. There's a lot of like companies will do stop the bleed training, which is now like a national thing. It's kind of like CPR, but it's specifically for bleeding control. That would be great to go take. Looking up on YouTube at different sources and trying to figure out how to do different treatment techniques than in the pre-hospital setting, and trying to do understanding like different medical emergencies in the field and how you can manage them. These are all things that, just start doing your research and start practicing. And if you're in a group of people and you have a team that you work with, like, do this stuff together. Everybody in your team, like, if you want to be super high speed and have like a quote unquote medic in your team, that's sick. But like all this stuff we've gone over today, everyone should be able to do. I mean, you want everyone, realistically, you're talking about small unit stuff. And if you're in a small unit, everybody on your team's got to be a borderline medic, everyone's got to be able to deal with it. If you're doing stuff at night, you're working in nods and stuff like that. That's sick and that's awesome. So practice this stuff under nods. Like, this stuff gets a lot harder under nods.
Practice it in moving vehicles. Practice in moving vehicles under nods.
Yep.
That's the only way you're going to get good at it, is to actually do what you would actually be doing.
test your fitness level too. Like, if you got to pick somebody up and get them out of there with all their gear on, test yourself, see if you can do it. You should be able to. You really should be able to. And that stuff gets hard. I mean, but you got to be able to pick people up and move them around. You got to be able to put somebody on a litter and haul them out of there, get them out of there quick, things like that, moving people around safely, being mindful of neck and head injuries, all that stuff. I mean, it goes on, and that's why it's overwhelming. But
yeah, and it doesn't even have to be in the sexy tactical area either. I mean, at home with your families, your wife, your children, practice. Do that too.
Yep.
This isn't for just, Army guys or want to be tactical, and this is for everyday at home with your family stuff. Because chances are, if you got kids, they are going to hurt themselves because they do.
Yep.
So are you ready for that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's bottom line. That's real talk.
And the line between, little bump, little simple scratch injury and severe injury is very thin when it comes to children.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, you hear horror stories all the time of like, yeah, my kid fell down the stairs and he died.
Mine fell out a window.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. But he's okay, obviously?
Yeah, he's okay, but that was right after brain surgery. That was rough. But yeah, he's okay. But it's just knowing how to respond in those situations, because it just, how these little tykes, they just go running around and they just fall out of dumb places, or they get their head caught in like stairways and just all kinds of weird stuff. So
yeah,
it's just being prepared to handle the injury. That's all we're talking about.
And further on that, we're seeing more and more how we've got these wild, crazy people out there doing like shooting places up and stuff like that. And you hear a lot of focus on like carry a gun, if, everyone should carry a gun in church and people should be able to carry guns in colleges and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I mean, I agree, like for sure. I ultimately we need to be responsible for our own protection, but that extends to now let's patch up these injuries that people have, So yeah, I mean, car accidents, man, like, dude, I mean, I've seen so many happen. And
weird ones too.
Yeah.
Injuries you wouldn't expect.
Yeah. And the amount of people that are just stumbling around with their cell phones out trying to live stream to the social media is like staggering, But there's no excuse for it. This is just got to do it. This is part of it. I mean, I know I've already said that 1,000 times now, but I can't stress it enough. I just get frustrated. I get frustrated seeing the lack of care. Like I think I told this story already, but I literally had a customer that has been, he always asks about the training and stuff like that. And, kind of acts like he wants to do it. And then recently we told him we were having a class coming up, and he was like, yeah. He's like, well, when are you going to start when are you starting up your firearms classes again this year? He's like, I think I'm just going to save my money. I'd rather come spend money with you on one of those classes. And it's like, yeah, like that's sick, dude. I appreciate it. But like, I mean, if I'm being honest, I'd rather you come take the medical class. I think your average person will get more out of the medical class than they will go and taking even the most high speed shooting class they could take. Because I mean, the shooting stuff, it's like I don't want to say it's easy, because it's definitely not easy, but if you're disciplined and you enjoy it, you're going to go do it a lot. If you go do it a lot, you're going to get better at it. But the medical stuff, it's hard to just go somewhere and do a lot,
Yeah, no, you're not. You're not going to get out and do it unless you're doing it in a professional manner. Like if you're a volunteer firefighter, or you're an EMT or whatever it may be, that's the only way you're getting exposure to it, is if you're doing it from a professional level of some sort. So, basically trainings like ours and trainings like other companies that are out there, there's plenty of great ones down in the lower 48. And that's kind of to answer that question from earlier, Josh, that's another draw for me and Jacob to start this thing, was the fact that Alaska doesn't have anyone that's doing like trauma medical training up here. So we wanted to be like, you know what? I think we could do a really, really good class where people get a lot of information, and we can make it a lot cheaper than having to fly a company up here and having the prices be jacked way up, because cost-wise, we are way cheaper than anyone else doing this stuff, and we offer a ton. So doing it here in the state of Alaska makes it way easier on us because we're not having to fly around and stuff like that. I mean, we would be willing to go outside of Alaska, but for now, that's where we're doing it, is in Alaska. So, yeah. I don't remember where I was going with that, but yeah.
No, I mean, I think you got there. I mean, that's the one of the big reasons. I mean, and that's still like, and I don't want to speak for Steven, but this is easily for me. And yeah, I mean, I've got more interest in it than I think your average person, but I'm more passionate about getting the medical training out there than I am about, the firearms training. That's not to say that I don't take the firearms training serious. I absolutely do. Any training we do, anything we offer, I take it with the utmost seriousness and professionalism, and I want it to be the best it can absolutely be. But I have seen, having a pretty broad perspective in my life so far, I have seen a need for medical skills and abilities far outweigh the need for skills with the firearm. It far outweighs it. And, I was overseas in combat, and again, more medical situations over there by far than situations where, you got to be a crack shot. And this is not to say that you shouldn't practice shooting, because that I do not want to come across like that.
But like you said earlier, people can practice shooting by themselves. Like, I can go out to the range without either of you guys, and I can go work on whatever I want to work on, whether that's working close quarter stuff, whether that's working concealment stuff with a handgun, draw strokes, things like that. I can do pretty much anything I want to do on a range if I have the proper, like, whether it's barriers, targets, all the stuff. You can work on, like, kind of isolate different skills on a range by yourself, and you can do pretty good at it. You can do better with more people because you have people to hold you accountable and stuff like that. I think it helps to have a group to go shoot with, but I can do it by myself. Where medical training, I can't run those bleeders by myself and pack the wounds. You know what I mean? I need someone to actually pump blood into that bad boy, and so I can pack it.
Yeah.
And then, like, and then the average Joe is not going to have that kind of stuff either. Like, they're not going to go out and buy a $800 bleeder so they can pack it a few times a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. What I found out is that the more time that I spent training, the more lack that I see in the actual training of others, or the lack in medical kits, or the lack in companies and corporations and that sort of thing. The more lack that I see, the more trained I get.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like with anything, the more of an understanding you have on something, the more you see. It's like when you get a new car, you're like, oh man, I got this. Like, I remember when I first got my Tacoma. It was like, I got the new body style Tacoma. You didn't see much of them. And I'm driving around, and I'm like, oh yeah, man, that's such a sweet truck. No one's driving. And then all of a sudden you start seeing them everywhere, and it's like, what in the world? But it's because you've, like, been made aware, I guess. Like, now you're, like, actually looking for it. And the same thing with medical kits. You walk into an establishment, you kind of look around like, man, they don't have a trauma medical kit in here. And this is like a big, like, metal shop. Like,
yeah.
This is like injury, injuries are going to happen all the time in here, probably.
Or this church with 1,000 people and doesn't have an AD, or doesn't have, like, stop the bleed kits, or
has literally nothing.
Like, how?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, we have our OSHA required first aid kit. And you're like, nice. You've got Band-Aids and tweezers.
And the funny thing is the more you train, the more you realize that you absolutely need it, and that you want to train more.
And that's why I'm passionate about it, because I know we've seen it so many times. Like, we've done tons of classes now, and we see people show up on day one. They're like, okay, and you can see it in their face. They're like, I hope this is going to be worth the money, and you kind of get started and get rolling. And then after day one, it's like I'm already, like, I feel like this was already money well spent. And then after day two, it's like you break down the barrier. Now it's like, okay,
it's go time.
I'm ready now. Like, what's the next step? What gear do I need? Like, okay, now I understand. I need more of this. Like, I have some of these, but now that I know what they are, I need more of this. And okay, so these kits are made for cars. Okay, cool. That makes sense. So, and then it just like opens up this big thing. And then you get like the follow-ons of like, are you guys going to do another or a more advanced course than this? And it's like, it's just, I love that. I love when you break down that barrier of like, whether it's unimportance, intimidation, ignorance, you break that down, and then now it's like, oh man, everybody needs this, and it's happened without fail. It's happened without fail. It's literally been like, oh, this is something that everyone should learn. Like, I'm going to tell everyone about it. And it's not that's the thing is it's, that's just our experience because we run a class.
Sorry about that.
Dude, you sucking on a lollipop over there?
I was trying to itch my upper lip with my teeth, and it just made a weird noise.
Oh man. It's not just like, I'm not trying to just I'm not using that to sell our class. I'm just saying that's the experience we have, because we run that class, and those are the experiences we're having. But that's a cool thing to see, and I'm passionate about that and like pushing into that. And anytime I see that, it's like fulfilling. It's like, oh yes, like
my
welcome
student has become the master.
Yeah, it's almost just like Matrix with the red, blue, and the bill.
Wow.
the red pill,
and the blue pill.
It's kind of like that.
We're going down like a Bill Cosby like reference there.
Got the pill in the water bottle, and before you know it,
the lip is hanging on the floor.
Oh man!
Alrighty.
Welcome to prison.
I think everything got like dismissed on that, but all right.
Did it?
I think so.
Dude, here goes Steven with his random celebrity statistic, like when he said Joe Rogan was on crack, and we looked it up after because I was like, was he?
Well, yeah, yes, I did.
Yeah, we looked it up after, and it was like we couldn't find anything about it. I was like, just coming up with random statistics, dude. So good. Well, anything else to add? I think we've beat this horse pretty dead. This is going to be it's time to treat it medically now, Josh. The horse. Get to work.
You just shoot those in the head, actually.
Oh, careful now.
Hey.
We're going to get PETA on the horn. Take you down.
No, that's what they do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this stuff's important, especially like, just in like Josh said, it's not just about the sexy stuff. It's about just everyday life. That's actually where I think most of your priority should be. But then, the point I was making is if you're one of those people that's constantly training and preparing for the cool guy stuff, this needs to be right in there with it. So
I would just chalk it up as being a responsible gun owner.
Yep.
It's part of it.
Yep. I agree. So yeah, I mean, if you are trying to look for resources, we've actually got right now, all we have on our YouTube is medical training as of this episode. So we're going to be adding a lot of other videos too. We're pretty new to the YouTube game. Honestly, it's a time thing, but we have some videos on there. Another really good source is Prep Medic. It's one of my favorites. He has really good stuff. So definitely check his YouTube out. He's a wealth of knowledge, and he's just got tons of high quality videos on different things. Sam Medical has some really cool videos on, different techniques with their products, and yeah, it's all with their specific products, but it's giving you good information on how to do certain things. There's some stuff out there from North American Rescue.
I say Skinny Medic.
Skinny Medic, that's another good one. Yeah. So yeah, and I'll link some of these in our description, but start getting the training, start learning about this stuff. If I can find a good source for basic anatomy, I'll try to get something in there, but I'm not sure. I'll have to do my homework and see if I can find something good for that. But, yeah, I mean, this is just, we've said it 1,000 times already, but this is just one of the things you got to do. It's part of it. And I think it's basically mandatory.
Yeah, and if you are interested in the class, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I'll link that too. I'll put it in there. And if you go to that link, it'll be like a sign up page, so it's mainly just for people that are local, but there's a little video attached that kind of breaks down a little sneak peek at what it is. And we're going to work on another one too that's going to actually kind of explain it, break it down, talk more about it. kind of a more like informational video on that course. So yeah, appreciate people hanging in with us and listening, and yeah, we'll try to get after it later in another episode. Josh, appreciate you sitting down with us, and thanks for the hard work last 2 days and laying in another good trauma class for a really cool organization here locally. This one was actually a corporate one that we just did, so
balling out of control. Yeah, thanks
so
for
fun.
the invite, and thanks for the friendship, and thanks for DDS, dude. And thank you to America.